The radio crackled with static, then silence. 3 seconds. 5. 10. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Vega pressed his headset tighter against his ear, willing the transmission to continue. But the jungle of Kandahar province had swallowed Team 7 whole, and their final words hung in the operations center like smoke from a funeral pyre. "We're finished." 200 miles away, Captain Kieran Ghost Blackwood was strapping herself into the cockpit of her Thunderbolt II when the scramble order came through. The Warthog's twin engines hadn't even finished their startup sequence when she heard those words through her helmet comm. "We're finished." Not under heavy fire or requesting immediate extraction. Finished. SEALs didn't use that word lightly. The Tactical Operations Center buzzed with controlled panic. Satellite feeds showed nothing but green canopy where Team 7 had vanished. No heat signatures. No movement. The insurgents had learned to disappear into the Earth itself, using tunnel networks that predated American involvement by decades. What made it worse was the timing. This was supposed to be a routine reconnaissance mission, almost milk-run easy for operators of their caliber. Ghost's hands moved through the pre-flight checklist with mechanical precision, but her mind was already calculating approach vectors and ammunition loads. The A-10 wasn't built for subtlety. With its massive 13 GAU 8 Avenger cannon and titanium bathtub protecting the pilot, it was designed to fly low, hit hard, and absorb punishment that would tear apart any other aircraft. But finding ghosts in a jungle required more than firepower. "Blackwood, you're cleared for immediate departure. Vector 270, Angels 5, came the controller's voice, tight with urgency. "Copy. Ghost is airborne in 30 seconds. As the Warthog lifted off the tarmac, Ghost couldn't shake the feeling that she was flying toward something that would change everything. She'd been here before. The lone wolf pilot that nobody quite trusted. The woman who'd earned her wings in a man's war but still had to prove herself every single mission. They called her Ghost not because she was invisible, but because she appeared when everyone else had given up hope. The jungle below stretched endlessly, a green maze where 7 of America's finest warriors had just vanished without a trace. Team 7 had been operating for 6 hours when their communications went dark. No distress beacon, no emergency transponder, nothing but that final, haunting transmission that nobody wanted to believe. Ghost pushed the throttles forward, feeling the familiar weight of gravity press her into the ejection seat. Somewhere in that verdant hell, American soldiers were either fighting for their lives or already beyond help. Either way, she was their only chance of coming home. The mission had started like countless others. Team 7, call signs ranging from Reaper to Tombstone, had inserted under cover of darkness into what intelligence had designated a low-threat reconnaissance zone. Their objective was straightforward: photograph suspected weapons caches, gather intelligence on insurgent movement patterns, and extract before dawn. Standard operating procedure for operators who had performed similar missions across 3 different theaters of war. What intelligence hadn't anticipated was the sophisticated early warning network the insurgents had constructed. Hidden cameras powered by motorcycle batteries, buried motion sensors connected to cell phone triggers, a communication system that used everything from mirror signals to trained birds. Team 7 walked into what amounted to the digital age equivalent of an Apache ambush. Ghost's A-10 thundered through the pre-dawn darkness at just under 300 knots, her radar painting the mountainous terrain in ghostly green relief. She'd flown this route dozens of times, knew every ridge and valley like the scars on her hands, but tonight felt different. The radio chatter from base had an edge she recognized, the controlled desperation that meant good people were about to die. "Ghost, this is Overwatch. Be advised, last known position of Team 7 was Grid 34 Alpha 77. No contact for 27 minutes. 27 minutes. In special operations time, that was geological epochs. SEALs were trained to check in every 15 minutes during active operations. Their silence meant either complete communications failure, unlikely given their redundant systems or something catastrophic. Ghost adjusted her heading, dropping altitude to 1,500 feet. The A-10's turbofan engines, mounted high on the fuselage to reduce ground fire damage, produced a distinctive whine that insurgents had learned to fear. But fear was a double-edged weapon. It could scatter enemies or make them fight harder, knowing death was already circling overhead. Through her night vision system, Ghost could see the jungle canopy rushing beneath her wings like a dark ocean. Team 7 was somewhere down there, 7 men trained to be invisible, now truly vanished. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was the ghost hunting for ghosts. Her weapon system showed green across the board. 400 rounds of 30 depleted uranium ammunition, Maverick missiles, cluster bombs, enough firepower to level several city blocks. But all the ordnance in the world meant nothing if she couldn't find her targets. And in counterinsurgency warfare, the wrong targets meant dead civilians and international incidents that could end careers and change foreign policy. The radio crackled again. Ghost, we're showing minimal heat signatures in your area of operations. Whatever happened down there, it happened fast. Ghost's jaw tightened. Fast meant ambush. Fast meant Team 7 never had a chance to fight back properly. Fast meant she might be flying a recovery mission instead of a rescue. The first sign of trouble had been Reaper's voice, calm and professional despite the chaos erupting around him. Overwatch, Team 7. Contact, contact, contact. Multiple hostiles, estimate 20 plus. We are pinned down and taking heavy fire from prepared positions. That transmission had come through clearly, along with the distinctive crack of AK-47 fire in the background. Standard ambush scenario. Dangerous but manageable for operators of their caliber. What followed was 14 minutes of sporadic radio traffic, requests for ammunition status, casualty reports, extraction coordination. Nothing that suggested the complete catastrophe to come. Then Tombstone's voice, strained but controlled. Overwatch, we've got problems. These aren't random insurgents. This is coordinated, professional. They knew we were coming. Ghost had been monitoring the tactical frequency from her ready room when that transmission came through. The implication was clear: intelligence failure or information leak. Either possibility meant Team 7 was operating in a kill box designed specifically for them. Now, flying through the darkness toward their last known position, Ghost felt the familiar pre-combat tension settle over her like a second skin. Her hands rested lightly on the flight controls, muscle memory from hundreds of combat missions, guiding micro-adjustments that kept the aircraft in perfect trim. The A-10 was not a forgiving aircraft. It demanded attention, respect, and absolute precision. But in return, it could absorb damage that would destroy any other plane and still bring its pilot home. Ghost, this is Overwatch. We're reading elevated radio traffic in your target area. Multiple frequencies, coordinated timing. Confirm your approach vector. Copy, Overwatch. Vector 270, approaching target area at Angels 15. Request immediate update on friendly positions. The pause that followed was too long. In military communications, hesitation meant bad news. Ghost, we have no current friendly positions. Team 7 went dark 4 minutes ago. Their last transmission was... Another pause. Their last transmission was we're finished. Ghost felt something cold settle in her stomach. SEALs didn't surrender. They didn't quit. We're finished could only mean one thing: they were about to be overrun and wanted their deaths to mean something. It was a final status report, not a cry for help. But Ghost had seen too many impossible situations turn around with the right application of close air support. Team 7 might be finished, but they weren't dead yet. And as long as they weren't dead, she had work to do. The jungle canopy stretched ahead, holding its secrets like a clenched fist. Somewhere in that green maze, 7 American warriors were making their last stand. Ghost's reputation had been forged in situations exactly like this one. 3 years earlier, over the mountains of Afghanistan, she had pulled a Marine reconnaissance team out of a similar nightmare. The Marines had been surrounded, outnumbered 8-1, and down to their last ammunition magazines when Ghost arrived overhead. The Taliban fighters had expected the usual American response, high-altitude bombing runs that they could evade by disappearing into caves and crevices. Instead, Ghost had done something that military historians would later describe as either brilliant or completely insane. She had taken her A-10 down to treetop level, below the effective range of shoulder-fired missiles, and conducted what amounted to aerial lawn mowing. For 47 minutes, she had flown continuous attack runs through mountain valleys, so narrow her wingtips nearly scraped the rock walls. When the dust settled, the Marine team walked out alive, and Ghost had earned a reputation that made grown men nervous. The problem with reputations was that they created expectations. Higher command expected Ghost to perform miracles. Her fellow pilots expected her to take risks they wouldn't consider. And Ghost herself expected to succeed where others failed, a psychological burden that grew heavier with each mission. Tonight, flying toward Team 7's last known position, Ghost could feel that weight pressing down on her shoulders. 7 SEALs were depending on her, whether they knew it or not. 7 families were depending on her. 7 futures hung in the balance of whatever she did in the next hour. Ghost, this is Razor 11, Apache helicopter flight inbound to your area. We've got infrared and targeting systems to assist your search. Ghost keyed her microphone. Copy, Razor 11. Be advised, we're dealing with sophisticated opposition. These aren't random insurgents. Roger that, Ghost. We heard the traffic. Whatever's down there, it's organized. The presence of Apache attack helicopters was reassuring, but Ghost knew they faced the same fundamental problem she did: finding targets in triple canopy jungle without accidentally engaging friendlies. The A-10's 30mm cannon could penetrate concrete bunkers, but it could also tear through American soldiers if fired at the wrong coordinates. Precision was everything, and precision required intelligence they simply didn't have. Ghost's radar showed the terrain ahead rising gradually toward a series of ridgelines that intelligence had designated as suspected insurgent strongholds. Team 7 had been operating in the valley systems between those ridges, following what satellite imagery suggested were supply routes. Standard hunter-killer mission profile, except the hunters had become the hunted. The radio crackled with Apache helicopter communications. Ghost, Razor 11 is showing multiple heat signatures in the valley system, but they're scattered and moving. Could be friendlies evading, could be hostiles maneuvering. Impossible to distinguish at this range. Heat signatures meant people were alive down there. Whether they were the right people was the question that could determine success or disaster. Team 7's leader, Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reaper Delacroix, had 23 years of special operations experience. He had survived Mogadishu, 3 tours in Iraq, and countless classified missions that would never appear in any official records. When Reaper said his team was finished, it carried the weight of 2 decades spent in the world's worst places doing the jobs that kept Americans safe while they slept. Ghost had never met Reaper, but she knew his type: quietly professional, absolutely competent, and completely uninterested in glory or recognition. SEALs like Reaper were the military equivalent of master craftsmen, artists who worked in violence and precision. They were also supremely practical. If Reaper said his team was finished, he had calculated their odds with mathematical precision and found them wanting. But calculations could be wrong, especially when they didn't account for an A-10 Thunderbolt diving out of the darkness, with 700 pounds of depleted uranium ammunition. Ghost's night vision system painted the jungle in ethereal green light, revealing a landscape that seemed to shift and breathe with hidden menace. The valley where Team 7 had vanished stretched ahead like an open wound in the earth, its floor lost in shadow despite her advanced imaging systems. Intelligence had identified 3 possible ambush sites along Team 7's planned route, all featuring the kind of natural choke points that special operations teams were trained to avoid, but sometimes couldn't. Ghost, this is Overwatch. We're picking up radio intercepts in Arabic and Pashto. The bad guys are talking to each other, coordinating movement. Whatever they've got planned, it's big. Radio intercepts meant the insurgents were confident enough to use electronic communications, which suggested either desperation or overwhelming tactical advantage. Ghost suspected the latter. Teams that ambushed Navy SEALs successfully didn't panic. They celebrated. The A-10's heads-up display showed her current position relative to Team 7's last known coordinates. 3 minutes out at current airspeed. 3 minutes to either witness the end of 7 military careers or become part of whatever legend they were writing with their blood in the jungle below. Ghost checked her weapons systems one final time. The GAU-8 cannon showed ready status, its titanium-reinforced barrel loaded with armor-piercing ammunition designed to destroy Soviet tanks. Against human targets, the weapon was grotesquely overpowered, but in situations like this, overpowered was exactly what American soldiers needed. Her radio crackled. Any station, this is Team 7. We are alive but heavily engaged. Request immediate close air support, danger close, grid 34 Alpha 77. We are marking our position with infrared strobes. Ghost's heart slammed against her ribs. They were alive. All the speculation, all the fear, all the preparation for a recovery mission. Team 7 was still fighting. Reaper's voice was calm, professional, completely controlled despite what had to be an impossible tactical situation. Team 7, this is Ghost. I have your grid. Infrared strobes confirmed. What's your situation? The pause was filled with automatic weapons fire. Ghost, Team 7 is in a prepared kill zone. Estimate 40 to 50 hostiles in reinforced positions. We've got wounded but are still combat effective. Be advised, enemy has shoulder-fired missiles and coordinated fire discipline. This is a professional operation. Ghost processed the tactical picture with the same cold analysis that had kept her alive through dozens of similar situations. 40 to 50 enemy fighters meant this wasn't a random encounter. It was a deliberate trap designed specifically for special operations teams. The mention of shoulder-fired missiles was particularly concerning. Those weapons could threaten her A-10 if she got careless with her approach vectors. Copy, Team 7. Describe your position relative to enemy forces. Ghost, we're in a natural depression approximately 50 meters north of the main insurgent line. They've got us pinned with overlapping fields of fire from elevated positions. Our movement is severely restricted. The tactical situation was becoming clearer. Team 7 had been channeled into a natural amphitheater where insurgent fighters could engage them from multiple directions, while remaining concealed in prepared positions. It was a classic kill zone, the kind of trap that required weeks of preparation and intimate knowledge of American tactics. Ghost dropped her altitude to 800 feet, low enough to see individual trees through her night vision system. The A-10's titanium armor could absorb significant damage from small arms fire, but shoulder-fired missiles required different tactics. She would need to stay mobile, never presenting a predictable target. Team 7, I need you to mark enemy positions with laser designators if you have them available. Negative on laser designators, Ghost. We're down to basics, rifles, grenades, and determination. Reaper's voice carried a note of dark humor that Ghost recognized. It was the gallows comedy that emerged when professionals faced impossible odds. SEALs who could joke while surrounded by 50 insurgents were SEALs who still had fight left in them. Ghost's radar was painting the terrain in precise detail, showing the ridgelines where insurgent positions were likely located. The problem was distinguishing between rock formations and fighting positions, between shadows and actual threats. One wrong burst from her cannon could turn a rescue mission into a fratricide incident. Ghost, this is Razor 11. We're showing massive heat signatures throughout the target area. These guys have been waiting for this opportunity. The Apache helicopter's thermal imaging was confirming what Ghost had suspected. Team 7 hadn't stumbled into a random ambush. They had been led into a carefully prepared battlefield where insurgent fighters had been waiting, possibly for days. Team 7, can you move to a more defensible position? Negative, Ghost, we're bracketed. Any movement draws coordinated fire from multiple positions. Ghost was beginning to understand the tactical genius of the trap. Team 7 was pinned in place, unable to maneuver but still dangerous enough that the insurgents couldn't simply overrun their position. It was a siege designed to last until the SEALs ran out of ammunition, or until American air support arrived and could be drawn into the kill zone as well. The insurgents had learned from 3 years of fighting Americans in Afghanistan. They had studied close air support tactics, analyzed A-10 attack patterns, and developed countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize the Warthog's advantages. Ghost was flying into a trap within a trap, a deadly chess game where the insurgents had been planning their moves for months. But Ghost had advantages the insurgents couldn't anticipate. She had flown more combat missions than most pilots flew in their entire careers. She had been shot down twice and walked away from crashes that should have killed her. Most importantly, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to read battlefields, to see patterns and opportunities that existed for only seconds at a time. Team 7, I need you to listen carefully. When I make my first attack run, the insurgents are going to concentrate fire on my aircraft. During that distraction, I want you to mark as many enemy positions as possible with tracers or anything visible from altitude. Copy, Ghost. We'll light them up when you draw their attention. Ghost pulled her A-10 into a climbing turn, gaining altitude for her attack run. The insurgents would be watching for her approach, waiting with their missiles and heavy machine guns. But they would be expecting conventional tactics, high-altitude bombing runs designed to minimize risk to the aircraft. Instead, Ghost was planning something that violated every rule of engagement she had ever learned. She was going to take her A-10 down into the weeds, below the effective range of most surface-to-air missiles, and conduct what amounted to aerial combat at knife-fighting range. The Warthog's engines whined as she pushed them to military power, accelerating toward the target area at just over 400 knots. At that speed, she would have approximately 15 seconds over the target before she would need to pull up to avoid flying into the ridgeline beyond. 15 seconds to identify targets, engage hostiles, and avoid friendly fire. 15 seconds to either save Team 7 or die trying. Ghost, this is Overwatch. Be advised, satellite imagery is showing movement throughout the target area. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. Movement meant the insurgents were either reinforcing their positions or preparing to overrun Team 7's defensive perimeter. Either possibility meant time was running out. Ghost pushed her throttles forward, feeling the familiar sensation of the A-10 accelerating toward combat. This was the moment she lived for, when all the training and experience focused into a single point of absolute clarity. Below her, 7 American warriors were fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds. Above her, stars shone with cold indifference to the human drama unfolding in the Afghan mountains. Between earth and sky, Ghost prepared to demonstrate why the A-10 Thunderbolt was called the Warthog: ugly, mean, and absolutely unstoppable when properly motivated. The radio crackled with Team 7's voice. Ghost, we're ready. Make it count. Ghost rolled her A-10 into a dive that would have made test pilots nervous, pushing the aircraft well beyond its recommended operational parameters. The airspeed indicator climbed past 400 knots, then 450, the Warthog's airframe groaning under stresses. It was designed to handle but not enjoy. Through her night vision system, Ghost could see muzzle flashes erupting throughout the valley below. Team 7 was in heavy contact, their defensive perimeter shrinking under coordinated insurgent pressure. Team 7, this is Ghost, commencing attack run, mark targets now. The response was immediate. Tracer rounds began arcing through the darkness as Team 7 directed fire toward insurgent positions, creating a deadly light show that revealed the tactical situation in stark detail. The SEALs were surrounded on three sides, pinned in a depression that offered some protection but no escape routes. Insurgent positions dotted the ridgelines above them, muzzle flashes winking like malevolent stars. Ghost's targeting computer painted potential targets across her heads-up display, but she ignored the technology in favor of pilot intuition developed through hundreds of combat missions. She could see the pattern of insurgent fire, recognize the discipline and coordination that marked professional fighters. These weren't random Taliban recruits, they were experienced guerrillas who had been planning this ambush for weeks. The first surface-to-air missile launched when Ghost was still 800 meters from the target area. She saw the telltale flash of the rocket motor, felt her threat warning system scream alerts in her headset. Standard evasion procedures called for immediate climb and deployment of countermeasures. Instead, Ghost pushed her dive steeper, using the missile's own tracking limitations against it. The weapon, designed to engage targets at medium altitude, lost lock as Ghost took her A-10 below its minimum engagement envelope. "Ghost, you're taking fire. Multiple missile launches." The Apache pilot's voice was tight with concern. Ghost didn't respond. She was entering what pilots called the zone, a state of absolute focus where conscious thought gave way to trained instincts and muscle memory. The A-10's third-aim cannon was coming into range, its targeting reticle sweeping across insurgent positions with mechanical precision. The first burst from the GAU-8 cannon was like thunder given physical form. Depleted uranium rounds, each the size of a beer bottle, tore through insurgent fighting positions with devastating effect. Ghost walked the fire across the ridgeline, following the pattern of muzzle flashes that Team 7's tracers had revealed. Rock exploded, trees disintegrated, and insurgent fighters simply vanished under the cannon's brutal impact. But Ghost's attack run was also drawing concentrated fire from every insurgent position in the valley. Bullet strikes sparked along her aircraft's armored belly, and another missile streaked past her cockpit close enough to see the warhead's distinctive shape. The A-10 absorbed the punishment like it was designed to, its titanium bathtub protecting Ghost from everything short of a direct hit. "Ghost, you're hit. We're showing damage to your aircraft." Ghost felt the A-10 shudder as something significant struck her starboard engine, but the aircraft continued flying with the stubborn determination that made Warthogs legendary. The second attack run was a masterpiece of precision flying. Ghost had identified the insurgent command position during her first pass, a reinforced bunker halfway up the eastern ridgeline, where muzzle flashes had been coordinated with tactical discipline. Taking out the command element would disrupt the ambush's coordination, giving Team 7 the opportunity they needed to break contact. But reaching that target required Ghost to fly directly through a gauntlet of concentrated anti-aircraft fire. The insurgents had learned from her first pass, adjusting their tactics to create overlapping fields of fire that would be almost impossible to survive. Almost. Ghost pulled her damaged A-10 into a climbing turn that stressed the aircraft's already compromised systems, then rolled into a dive that approached the target from an unexpected vector. She was gambling that the insurgents' prepared positions were oriented toward the most likely attack approaches, leaving narrow gaps in their defensive coverage. The gamble paid off. Ghost's second cannon run caught the insurgents repositioning their weapons, striking the command bunker with a concentrated burst that sent secondary explosions cascading down the ridgeline. Ammunition stores detonated in chain reactions that lit up the valley like daylight, revealing insurgent positions that had been invisible moments before. Ghost, this is Team 7. Whatever you just hit, it's working. Enemy fire is decreasing. But Ghost's aircraft was paying the price for her aggressive tactics. Warning lights painted her cockpit in shades of amber and red. Her starboard engine was running rough, producing intermittent power that made flight control difficult. Hydraulic pressure was dropping, and her fuel consumption had increased dramatically due to battle damage. Ghost, you need to egress now. Your aircraft is severely damaged. The Apache pilot's voice carried genuine alarm. Ghost keyed her microphone while pulling into another attack run. Negative. Team 7 is still in contact. I've got fight left in this bird. The third pass was different. Instead of the high-speed diving attacks she had used before, Ghost brought her A-10 in low and slow, using the aircraft's unique ability to loiter over the battlefield while providing continuous fire support. The insurgents, their command structure disrupted and their positions exposed, were beginning to break contact, but some were fighting with the desperate ferocity of cornered animals. Ghost's cannon fire walked methodically across the remaining insurgent positions, each burst guided by Team 7's tracer fire and her own combat intuition. She was flying the A-10 like a surgeon's scalpel now, using precise 3-second bursts instead of the devastating continuous fire she had employed earlier. Team 7, this is Ghost. I'm showing decreased enemy activity. Can you move to extraction point? Ghost, we've got 3 wounded but can move. We're going to need cover while we displace. Ghost checked her ammunition counter. Less than 100 rounds remaining. Her fuel was approaching minimum required for return to base. Her aircraft was held together by engineering excellence and pilot determination. But Team 7 needed cover, and cover was exactly what A-10 Thunderbolts were designed to provide. The extraction took 17 minutes that felt like 17 hours. Ghost orbited the valley at minimum safe altitude, her damaged A-10 threatening to fall apart with each turn. She had switched to single-shot cannon fire to conserve ammunition, picking off individual insurgents who were trying to shadow Team 7's movement toward the extraction point. The SEALs moved with the fluid coordination that made them legendary, carrying their wounded teammates while maintaining tactical awareness that kept them alive in an environment designed to kill them. Ghost could see them through her night vision system, 7 dark shapes moving across terrain that offered minimal concealment, depending entirely on her overhead protection to reach safety. Ghost, this is Razor 11. We've got eyes on Team 7 approaching extraction. You can break off now. Ghost wanted nothing more than to turn her battered aircraft toward home, but she could see insurgent fighters still maneuvering for final shots at the escaping SEALs. Her ammunition counter showed 37 rounds remaining, enough for one final engagement if she made every shot count. The last insurgent position was a sniper's nest overlooking the extraction landing zone. Ghost could see the muzzle flash as the hidden fighter engaged Team 7, forcing them to take cover just 50 meters short of safety. The Apache helicopters couldn't engage without risking fratricide, and Team 7 was pinned down with nowhere to maneuver. Ghost rolled her A-10 into what she knew would be her final attack run. Her damaged engines were running on fumes, her hydraulic systems were failing, and her aircraft was trailing smoke that would be visible for miles. But she had 37 rounds of 30 ammunition and one last chance to get American soldiers home alive. The sniper's position was partially concealed behind a rock formation that would require absolute precision to engage without causing a landslide that could bury Team 7. Ghost lined up her shot with the same careful deliberation she had used for hundreds of previous engagements, waiting for the perfect moment when geometry and timing aligned. The GAU-8 cannon fired its final burst, 5 rounds of depleted uranium that struck the sniper's position with surgical accuracy. The insurgent fighter disappeared in a cloud of pulverized rock, and Team 7 resumed their movement toward the extraction helicopters that were already spinning up for departure. Ghost, this is Team 7. We're clear. Thanks for the ride. Reaper's voice carried exhaustion and gratitude in equal measure. 7 American warriors were going home because an A-10 pilot had been willing to risk everything for soldiers she had never met. Ghost turned her smoking aircraft toward base, wondering if she would make it back before something critical failed. Behind her, the Afghan mountains held their secrets once again, but tonight those secrets didn't include 7 dead Navy SEALs. The flight back to base was a testament to the A-10's legendary toughness and Ghost's skill as a pilot. Her starboard engine finally failed completely over the mountains, leaving her flying on single-engine power with compromised flight controls and fuel reserves that hovered dangerously close to emergency minimums. The aircraft that had been designed to absorb punishment and keep flying was living up to its reputation, but even warthogs had limits. Ghost, this is Overwatch. We're showing severe damage to your aircraft. Declare your intentions. Ghost keyed her microphone with hands that trembled slightly from adrenaline and exhaustion. Overwatch, Ghost is returning to base single engine. Request priority landing and emergency services standing by. Copy Ghost. You're cleared direct emergency authority. Medical and fire teams are positioning now. The landscape below gradually changed from hostile mountains to the relative safety of friendly airspace. But Ghost knew she wasn't safe until her aircraft was on the ground and shut down. Single-engine approaches in damaged aircraft were never routine, especially when hydraulic systems were failing and flight controls were becoming increasingly sluggish. Ghost's training took over, methodically working through emergency checklists while calculating approach speeds and landing distances with the mathematical precision that had kept her alive through 3 years of combat flying. The A-10 was forgiven many pilot errors, but landing wasn't one of them. Ghost, this is Tower. We have you on final approach. Your aircraft appears to be trailing smoke and debris. Are you able to maintain control? Tower, Ghost has control. Aircraft is damaged but flyable. Request emergency equipment standing by. The runway lights appeared ahead like a welcoming constellation, marking the difference between another successful mission and becoming a statistic in aviation safety reports. Ghost configured her aircraft for landing, feeling the damaged systems respond with reluctant cooperation. Gear down and locked. Flaps extended. Airspeed stabilizing at approach numbers that would have to be close enough. The A-10 touched down with the graceless efficiency that characterized everything about the aircraft, rolling out straight despite crosswinds and battle damage that would have made other planes unflyable. Emergency vehicles paced the aircraft down the runway, their flashing lights painting the night in reds and blues that meant safety and home. Ghost taxied clear of the active runway and shut down her engines, feeling the sudden silence that always followed combat missions. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind the bone-deep exhaustion that came with flying extended missions in hostile airspace. But exhaustion was a luxury. 7 SEALs were alive because she had been willing to push her aircraft and herself beyond normal limits. Ghost, this is Overwatch. Outstanding work tonight. Team 7 sends their thanks. Ghost smiled tiredly as ground crews swarmed around her aircraft, documenting battle damage that told the story of one night's work over Afghanistan. Tomorrow, there would be debriefings and damage assessments and award recommendations. But tonight, 7 American warriors were sleeping safely because an A-10 pilot had remembered why she wore the uniform. Debriefing took place 3 hours after Ghost's landing, long enough for medical personnel to confirm she was uninjured and for intelligence officers to begin analyzing the tactical implications of the night's engagement. The conference room was filled with the usual cast of military professionals, operations officers, intelligence analysts, and senior commanders who needed to understand what had happened and why. Ghost sat at the head of the table, still wearing her flight suit and looking like she could sleep for a week. Her aircraft was in the maintenance hangar, being systematically disassembled to assess battle damage that preliminary inspections suggested was extensive enough to require major structural repairs. "Captain Blackwood," began Colonel Martinez, the wing commander, "your actions tonight were extraordinary by any standard. Team 7 owes their lives to your willingness to engage in extremely dangerous close air support." Ghost nodded acknowledgement but remained characteristically understated in her response. "Sir, Team 7 did the hard work. I just provided covering fire." The intelligence officer leaned forward with data tablets and satellite imagery that painted a comprehensive picture of the night's engagement. "Captain, the insurgent force you engaged was significantly larger and better organized than initial estimates suggested. Post-mission analysis indicates you faced approximately 60 hostile fighters in prepared positions." 60 fighters. The number hung in the air like smoke. Ghost had faced 2-to-1 odds against a force that had been planning their ambush for weeks, using an aircraft that had absorbed enough battle damage to ground most other planes. The mathematics of survival suggested she should be dead or captured. The insurgents appear to have been specifically targeting American Special Operations teams, continued the intelligence officer. "Communications intercepts suggest they had been monitoring our patrol patterns for months, waiting for exactly this type of opportunity." Colonel Martinez studied the tactical displays with professional interest. "Captain, your decision to conduct low-altitude attack runs was tactically sound but extremely risky. Can you walk us through your reasoning?" Ghost gathered her thoughts, trying to translate split-second combat decisions into coherent analysis. "Sir, the insurgents had prepared for conventional high-altitude attacks. They had positioned surface-to-air missiles and coordinated their defenses accordingly. By going low, I negated most of their prepared defenses and forced them to react to unexpected tactics." "And nearly got yourself killed in the process," observed the operations officer. "Yes, sir, but Team 7 was already in a situation where conventional tactics wouldn't work. Sometimes you have to break the rules to save lives." The room fell silent as the implications of Ghost's statement settled over the assembled officers. She had violated numerous safety protocols, ignored standard operating procedures, and risked a multi-million-dollar aircraft on tactics that existed nowhere in official manuals. She had also saved 7 lives and eliminated a significant insurgent threat. Colonel Martinez closed the tactical folder and looked directly at Ghost. "Captain, your actions tonight demonstrate the kind of initiative and tactical brilliance that wins wars. You'll be recommended for appropriate recognition." The maintenance report on Ghost's A-10 read like a catalog of everything that could go wrong with an aircraft and still have it return home. 73 bullet holes, 1 engine completely destroyed, hydraulic lines severed, flight control surfaces damaged, fuel system compromised, landing gear mechanisms operated manually due to electrical failures. Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the maintenance squadron's senior non-commissioned officer, had seen battle-damaged aircraft before, but Ghost's Warthog represented something special. The fact that she had flown it home at all was miraculous. That she had conducted multiple attack runs while absorbing this level of damage was beyond extraordinary. It was the stuff of legends that maintenance crews would tell for decades. "Captain," Rodriguez said, as Ghost inspected her aircraft the morning after the mission, "I've been working on these birds for 22 years. I've never seen one take this kind of punishment and keep flying. You and this airplane earned each other last night." Ghost ran her hand along the titanium armor that had saved her life, feeling the rough edges where bullets had been stopped by engineering excellence and pilot determination. Each scar told part of the story, a story that began with 7 SEALs in trouble and ended with 7 SEALs going home to their families. The A-10 would require 6 weeks of intensive repairs before returning to flight status. New engines, rebuilt hydraulic systems, replaced flight surfaces, and structural reinforcements that would add weight but increase survivability. When the work was complete, the aircraft would be stronger than before, bearing its scars like medals earned in combat. Word of the mission was already spreading through the base with the speed that characterized military gossip. Ghost's low-altitude attack runs were being discussed in pilot-ready rooms, analyzed in tactical studies, and embellished with each retelling. By noon, she had become the pilot who flew through hell to save Navy SEALs, a reputation that would follow her for the rest of her career. But Ghost was more interested in the message that had arrived from Team 7 that morning. It was brief, professional, and carried the weight of brotherhood that transcended service rivalries. Ghost, 7 warriors went home because one pilot remembered what duty means. Thank you, Reaper and Team 7. That message, printed on standard military stationery and signed by men whose names would never appear in newspapers, meant more to Ghost than any medal or commendation. It was recognition from professionals who understood exactly what she had risked and why she had been willing to risk it. Later that afternoon, Ghost received orders for a new assignment. She was being transferred to a Special Operations Aviation Unit where her talents could be fully utilized in support of America's most elite warriors. It was a promotion disguised as a transfer, recognition that her skills had evolved beyond conventional close air support into something more specialized and infinitely more dangerous. As Ghost packed her personal belongings and prepared for the move, she reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. 3 years ago, she had been just another pilot trying to prove herself in a combat zone. Now she was Ghost, the pilot who appeared when hope was lost and the impossible needed to become possible. The medal ceremony took place 6 weeks later, after the media attention had faded and the tactical lessons had been incorporated into training manuals. Ghost stood at attention in dress blues that felt strange after months of flight suits and combat gear, listening to citations that reduced the chaos of combat into clean, official language. For extraordinary heroism in aerial flight while participating in sustained aerial combat operations against numerically superior enemy forces. The citation read, words that couldn't capture the reality of flying a damaged aircraft through concentrated anti-aircraft fire to save soldiers she had never met. The Distinguished Flying Cross was heavy in Ghost's hands, its weight representing not just personal recognition, but acknowledgement of what could be accomplished when training, courage, and determination converged at the critical moment. She thought of Team 7, now scattered to various assignments, but united by shared experience that would bond them forever. Senior Chief Reaper was present for the ceremony, having traveled from his new assignment specifically to witness Ghost receive the recognition she deserved. When she spotted him in the audience, their eyes met for a moment, professional acknowledgement between warriors who had shared something that civilians would never understand. After the ceremony, Reaper approached Ghost with the measured stride of a man who had spent his life in dangerous places. "Captain, I wanted to thank you personally. What you did that night, there aren't words for it." Ghost extended her hand, which Reaper shook with the firm grip of mutual respect. "Senior Chief, you and your team did the real work. I just provided taxi service." Reaper smiled at the understatement. "Ma'am, that was the most expensive taxi ride in military history, and worth every penny." They talked for several minutes about technical aspects of the mission, professional shop talk that allowed them to process the emotional weight of what they had shared. Ghost learned that all 7 SEALs had returned to full duty, their wounds healed and their confidence unshaken by the ambush. Reaper learned that Ghost's new assignment would put her in direct support of special operations teams, a role that perfectly matched her unique talents. "Captain," Reaper said as their conversation concluded, "if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. Team 7 doesn't forget." Ghost nodded, understanding that she had been inducted into an informal brotherhood that transcended rank and service boundaries. She was no longer just an A-10 pilot. She was family to some of America's most elite warriors, a status that carried both privileges and responsibilities. As the ceremony concluded and attendees began to disperse, Ghost reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that night over the Afghan mountains. She had proven herself in ways that mattered, earned respect that couldn't be granted or taken away, and found her true calling as a pilot who specialized in the impossible. The sky was calling, and Ghost was ready to answer. Ghost's new assignment brought her to Hurlburt Field, Florida, home to Air Force Special Operations Command, and the kind of missions that didn't appear in official records. Her squadron flew modified aircraft in support of operations that required absolute precision, perfect timing, and pilots who could improvise solutions to problems that had never been encountered before. The transition from conventional close air support to special operations was like moving from classical music to jazz. The basic principles remained the same, but the execution required creativity, intuition, and a willingness to break established patterns when the mission demanded it. Ghost adapted quickly, her experience over Afghanistan having prepared her for the unconventional thinking that special operations required. Her squadron mates were a collection of pilots who had distinguished themselves in conventional assignments before being selected for more specialized roles. They were professionals who had proven they could fly standard missions flawlessly before being trusted with missions that standard procedures couldn't address. "Blackwood," said Major Williams, the squadron operations officer, during Ghost's first week at Hurlburt, "you've got a reputation for creative problem-solving. That's exactly what we need here. Our missions tend to involve situations where conventional tactics don't apply." Ghost nodded, understanding that she was being evaluated not just for her flying skills, but for her ability to think independently under pressure. Special operations pilots needed to be tacticians as well as aviators, capable of making strategic decisions in seconds while managing complex aircraft systems and coordinating with ground forces. Her first mission came 2 weeks later, a classified operation that required precision insertion of Special Forces teams into denied territory. The details were compartmentalized on a need-to-know basis, but Ghost's role was clear: provide air support for operators conducting missions that officially didn't exist. The briefing took place in a secure facility where maps were covered when not in use, and conversations were conducted in whispers that acknowledged the sensitivity of the information being discussed. Ghost found herself working with joint teams that included Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and intelligence personnel, whose agencies were identified only by acronyms. "This mission requires surgical precision," explained the mission commander, a Navy captain whose weathered face suggested extensive experience in dangerous places. "The margin for error is essentially zero. One mistake could compromise national security interests that extend far beyond tonight's operation." Ghost studied the tactical displays that showed terrain, weather patterns, enemy positions, and friendly force locations, with a precision that reflected months of intelligence gathering. The mission would require flying through denied airspace, avoiding sophisticated air defense systems, and providing close air support with weapons effects that had to be measured in meters rather than kilometers. As she prepared for the mission, Ghost reflected on how her career had evolved from basic flight training to this moment. Each previous mission had been preparation for increasingly complex challenges, building the experience and confidence necessary to operate at the highest levels of military aviation. The mission launched at 300 hours under conditions of absolute radio silence. Ghost's modified had been equipped with stealth enhancements and electronic warfare systems that could defeat most radar-guided weapons, but the aircraft's signature was still significant enough to require careful route planning and precise timing. She flew through mountain valleys at altitudes that left no margin for pilot error, following GPS coordinates that had been programmed into classified navigation systems. The landscape below was hostile territory where American aircraft were unwelcome and shoot-first policies were standard operating procedure. Ghost's mission was to provide overwatch for a team conducting sensitive site exploitation, the military euphemism for searching enemy facilities for intelligence materials. The team would be on the ground for exactly 17 minutes, during which time Ghost would ensure they could complete their work without interference from hostile forces. The target was a compound in mountainous terrain that intelligence had identified as a key node in enemy communications networks. The structure was defended by professional security forces equipped with modern weapons and trained to respond rapidly to threats. The American team would have to penetrate the facility, collect specific materials, and extract before reinforcements could arrive. Ghost's role was to eliminate any external threats that could compromise the ground team's mission. She would be operating under rules of engagement that required positive identification of hostile intent before weapons release, but also demanded immediate response to any threat against American personnel. Ghost, this is Phoenix Team. We're beginning our approach to the target. Request confirmation of Overwatch status. Ghost keyed her microphone with the brevity that characterized special operations communications. Phoenix Team, Ghost has eyes on. Area is clear. You're good to proceed. Through her advanced imaging systems, Ghost could see the ground team moving through terrain that offered minimal concealment. They moved with the fluid coordination that characterized elite operators, each team member understanding his role in a carefully choreographed operation. The compound appeared quiet, its security forces apparently unaware of the approaching Americans. But Ghost knew that appearances could be deceiving, especially in operations where the enemy had time to prepare sophisticated defenses. She maintained constant surveillance, watching for movement patterns or communications activities that might indicate the team was walking into a trap. Phoenix Team, this is Ghost. I'm showing thermal signatures inside the compound but no external security patrols. Be advised, the lack of visible security may indicate electronic surveillance systems. Copy Ghost, we're proceeding as briefed. Ghost watched the team breach the compound's outer perimeter with tools and techniques that allowed them to bypass physical barriers without triggering alarms. Their movement was precise, purposeful, and completely professional. These were operators who had conducted similar missions across multiple theaters of war. The first sign of trouble came 8 minutes into the ground team's penetration of the compound. Ghost's electronic warfare systems detected radio transmissions on frequencies associated with enemy security forces, suggesting that Phoenix Team's presence had been discovered despite their careful approach. Phoenix Team, be advised. I'm picking up increased radio traffic that suggests your presence may be compromised. Recommend expediting your timeline. Copy Ghost, we're accelerating collection procedures. Ghost adjusted her orbit to provide better observation angles while maintaining sufficient altitude to avoid portable surface-to-air missiles. The balance between surveillance capability and aircraft survivability was delicate, requiring constant recalculation based on changing threat conditions. Movement appeared on Ghost's thermal imaging system, vehicles approaching the compound from multiple directions. The response was coordinated and rapid, suggesting that enemy forces had been positioned in advance to respond to exactly this type of incursion. Phoenix Team, you've got company. Multiple vehicles approaching your position from north and east. Estimate 4 to 6 minutes until they reach the compound. Ghost, we need 3 more minutes to complete collection. Can you delay those vehicles? Ghost studied the tactical situation with the analytical precision that had kept her alive through dozens of similar engagements. The approaching vehicles were still outside the compound's immediate area, traveling on roads that offered opportunities for interdiction, without risking damage to Phoenix Team's target building. Phoenix Team, I can engage the vehicles, but it will compromise noise discipline. The entire area will know Americans are present. Ghost, mission success depends on completing collection. Engage as necessary. Ghost rolled her A-10 into an attack run that would bring her weapons to bear on the lead vehicle in the approaching convoy. Her targeting systems locked onto the military truck that was leading the response force, its thermal signature clearly distinguishing it from civilian traffic. The GAU-8 cannon fired a precise burst that struck the vehicle's engine compartment, disabling it without causing casualties among the occupants. Ghost's rules of engagement required her to use minimum force necessary to accomplish mission objectives, which meant disabling vehicles rather than destroying them when possible. The convoy's response was immediate and professional. The remaining vehicles scattered off the main road, taking positions that would allow them to advance on foot while presenting minimal targets for air attack. Ghost realized she was facing trained soldiers rather than random insurgents. Phoenix Team, the vehicles are disabled but ground forces are maneuvering toward your position on foot. You've got maybe 2 minutes before they reach the compound perimeter. Ghost, we're completing collection now. Stand by for extraction support. Ghost maintained her orbit while tracking the advancing enemy forces through her night vision systems. The soldiers were moving with tactical discipline that suggested professional military training, advancing in coordinated bounds while maintaining communications discipline. Phoenix Team's extraction was a masterpiece of precision timing and tactical coordination. As enemy forces closed on the compound, the American operators completed their intelligence collection and moved to predetermined extraction points where helicopter support was standing by. Ghost's role shifted from overwatch to direct fire support as enemy forces attempted to interdict the extraction. She engaged multiple targets with surgical precision, using her cannon's accuracy to disable enemy positions without causing excessive damage to surrounding structures. Ghost, this is Hawk Flight. We're inbound for extraction. Request suppression of enemy positions on the north side of the compound. Copy Hawk Flight, engaging now. Ghost's attack runs were models of close air support, each pass carefully planned to provide maximum effect while minimizing risk to friendly forces. She had learned to read battlefields with intuitive understanding that allowed her to identify threats and opportunities in seconds. The enemy forces found themselves pinned down by accurate cannon fire that prevented them from effectively engaging the extraction helicopters. Ghost's presence overhead created a bubble of protective fire that allowed Phoenix Team to reach their extraction points and board the waiting aircraft. Ghost, this is Phoenix Team. We're secure and airborne. Mission complete. Thanks for the cover. Ghost felt the familiar satisfaction that came with successful mission completion. Another special operations team had completed their work and returned safely, their intelligence collection potentially saving lives and advancing national security, objectives that she would never fully understand. As the helicopters disappeared into the darkness carrying Phoenix Team toward safety, Ghost turned her aircraft toward home base. The mission had lasted less than an hour, but its implications would ripple through intelligence networks for months to come. The flight back to Hurlburt Field gave Ghost time to reflect on how dramatically her role had evolved since that night over Afghanistan. She was no longer just providing close air support. She was an integral part of America's most sensitive operations, trusted with missions that required absolute discretion and flawless execution. Back at base, the debrief would be conducted in secure facilities where details would be recorded in classified databases accessible only to personnel with appropriate clearances. The mission would become part of the historical record of American special operations, its success measured not in headlines or public recognition, but in objectives achieved and lives saved. Ghost had found her calling in the intersection between courage and precision, where split-second decisions could determine the success or failure of operations that protected American interests worldwide. She was no longer the underestimated pilot seeking to prove herself. She had become Ghost, the aviator who appeared when America's elite warriors needed guardian angels with 13 cannons. 6 months later, Ghost received word that Senior Chief Reaper had been killed in action during a classified operation in Syria. The news came through unofficial channels, a quiet conversation in a squadron-ready room where someone mentioned that one of the SEALs from that Afghanistan mission hadn't made it home from his latest deployment. The memorial service was private, attended by family members and military personnel who had served with Reaper during his 24-year career. Ghost flew to Virginia Beach specifically to pay her respects to the man whose calm professionalism had helped her become the pilot she was today. The ceremony took place at the Special Operations Memorial, where Reaper's name would join hundreds of others who had died in service to operations that might never be publicly acknowledged. Ghost stood among warriors from multiple services, all united by shared understanding of what Reaper had represented and what his loss meant to the special operations community. Marcus Delacroix was the kind of leader who made everyone around him better, said the Navy captain who delivered the eulogy. He trained warriors, mentored young SEALs, and led from the front in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. His legacy lives in every operator he trained and every mission he made possible. After the service, Ghost was approached by several members of Reaper's current team, SEALs who had served with him during his final deployment. They had heard about the Afghanistan mission and wanted to meet the pilot who had saved their teammate's life on that memorable night. "Ma'am," said one of the operators, a young petty officer whose face showed the weathering that came from multiple combat deployments, "Senior Chief told us about you, about what you did that night in Afghanistan. He said you were the kind of pilot that SEALs could count on when everything went wrong." Ghost nodded, feeling the weight of Reaper's legacy and the responsibility that came with being remembered by America's elite warriors. He was a professional who never asked for anything he wouldn't do himself. That's all any of us can aspire to be. The conversation continued for several minutes, touching on shared experiences and mutual respect that transcended service rivalries. Ghost learned that Reaper had spoken frequently about their mission together, using it as an example of what could be accomplished when different military specialties worked together toward common objectives. As the gathering concluded and attendees began to disperse, Ghost reflected on the circular nature of military service. The young SEALs she had met would carry forward Reaper's lessons and traditions, just as she would carry forward the standards he had demonstrated that night over Afghanistan. Reaper's death was a reminder of the stakes involved in special operations, the reality that professionals who lived dangerous lives sometimes paid the ultimate price for their service. But his legacy would live on in the operators he had trained and the standards he had established through years of exemplary service. Ghost flew back to Florida with renewed appreciation for the brotherhood that connected America's special operations community. She was part of something larger than individual careers or personal achievements, a tradition of service that demanded excellence and rewarded it with the knowledge that their work made the world safer for people who would never know their names. 2 years after the Afghanistan mission that had defined her career, Ghost was selected for promotion to major and assignment as operations officer for her squadron. The promotion came with increased responsibilities and the kind of leadership challenges that tested officers in ways that combat missions never could. Her new role required her to balance the competing demands of mission requirements, personnel management, and resource allocation, while maintaining the operational readiness that special operations missions demanded. She was responsible for training programs, mission planning, and the career development of pilots who looked to her for professional guidance. Ghost's reputation had evolved beyond her individual flying skills to encompass the leadership qualities that made elite units effective. She was known for demanding excellence while providing the mentorship that helped younger pilots develop the judgment necessary for special operations flying. "Major Blackwood," said Colonel Henderson during Ghost's promotion ceremony, "your evolution from tactical expert to operational leader represents exactly what the Air Force needs in our senior officers. You've proven that technical competence and leadership ability can coexist at the highest levels." Ghost accepted the promotion with characteristic humility, understanding that increased rank came with correspondingly greater responsibility for the success and safety of the personnel under her command. She was no longer just responsible for her own performance. She was accountable for developing the next generation of special operations pilots. Her first major challenge came during a complex joint exercise that involved multiple services, international partners, and scenarios that pushed participants beyond their comfort zones. Ghost was responsible for coordinating air operations that supported ground teams from 6 different nations, each with unique capabilities and operating procedures. The exercise scenario involved hostage rescue in denied territory, requiring precise timing and flawless coordination between air and ground elements. Any mistake could result in simulated casualties that would be analyzed extensively in post-exercise reviews. Ghost's role required her to think strategically while maintaining awareness of tactical details that could determine success or failure. She had to balance competing priorities, manage scarce resources, and make decisions under time pressure that simulated real-world operational conditions. "Major, the ground teams are requesting close air support at coordinates that put them dangerously close to simulated civilian structures," reported one of her staff officers during the exercise. "Rules of engagement require positive identification of hostile intent before weapons release." Ghost studied the tactical display that showed friendly forces, enemy positions, and civilian areas with color coding that reflected the complexity of modern warfare. The scenario was designed to test decision-making under ambiguous conditions where perfect solutions didn't exist. Approved, but with modified weapons effects to minimize simulated collateral damage. Coordinate with ground commanders to ensure they understand the limitations. The exercise continued for 72 hours, presenting new challenges that required adaptive thinking and creative problem-solving. Ghost's performance was evaluated not just on tactical success, but on her ability to develop subordinate leaders while maintaining operational effectiveness. The exercise debrief revealed that Ghost Squadron had performed exceptionally, achieving mission objectives while maintaining safety standards that exceeded Air Force requirements. More importantly, the exercise had provided training opportunities that would pay dividends during actual operations. Major Blackwood's leadership during this exercise demonstrated exactly the kind of professional development we want to see in our senior officers, observed the exercise director during the final evaluation session. She balanced mission accomplishment with personnel development in ways that strengthened the entire force. Ghost's reputation as a leader was solidifying alongside her established credentials as a pilot. She was developing the kind of professional respect that came not from individual heroics, but from consistent excellence in roles of increasing responsibility. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon, while Ghost was reviewing training schedules for the following month. The voice belonged to a colonel she had never met, speaking from the Pentagon about opportunities that would require her to consider career changes that could reshape her entire future. "Major Blackwood, your name has come up in discussions about officer development programs that would prepare you for senior leadership positions. Are you interested in assignments that would broaden your experience beyond flying operations?" Ghost considered the question carefully, understanding that accepting would mean stepping away from the cockpit that had defined her identity for over a decade. But she also recognized that leadership opportunities came with responsibilities to serve where the Air Force needed her most. "Sir, I'm interested in any assignment that would allow me to contribute to the mission. Can you provide more details about what these opportunities would involve?" The conversation that followed opened possibilities that Ghost had never considered. Advanced military education, joint service assignments, and leadership positions that would prepare her for senior command responsibilities. The path being described would eventually lead away from flying, but toward roles where she could influence doctrine, training, and the development of future leaders. These opportunities would require significant personal sacrifice. You'd be giving up flying duties that you obviously excel at in favor of broader responsibilities that might not provide the same personal satisfaction. Ghost understood the implications. Accepting meant leaving behind the identity she had built as a combat pilot and embracing a future that emphasized leadership over individual technical expertise. But she also recognized that senior leaders who understood operational realities from personal experience were exactly what the military needed. "Sir, I'll accept whatever assignment best serves the Air Force. My personal preferences are secondary to organizational needs." The commitment she made that afternoon would reshape Ghost's career trajectory, moving her toward roles where her influence would extend far beyond individual combat missions. She was evolving from tactical expert to strategic leader, carrying forward the lessons learned over Afghanistan and in special operations into positions where she could shape the future of military aviation. Her journey from underestimated pilot to respected leader was entering a new phase, one that would test different capabilities while building on the foundation of competence and character she had established through years of excellence under pressure. Ghost's final flight as a regular squadron pilot took place on a perfect autumn morning, when visibility extended to the horizon and winds were calm enough to make flying feel like poetry. She had requested a routine training mission, wanting to end her cockpit career with the kind of straightforward flying that had first attracted her to aviation. The A-10 responded to her commands with the familiar precision that had made their partnership legendary. Every control input produced exactly the expected response, every system functioned flawlessly, and the aircraft felt like a natural extension of her intentions. This was flying as it was meant to be, pilot and machine working together toward common purpose. Ghost's radio crackled with routine communications from other aircraft in the training area, professional conversations that represented the daily work of military aviation. She listened with appreciation for the competence and dedication that characterized every transmission, understanding that she was part of something larger than individual careers. As she flew through practice maneuvers that demonstrated the A-10's capabilities, Ghost reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From flight training through combat missions to leadership responsibilities, each phase had built on the previous one while preparing her for challenges that couldn't be anticipated. The mission that had defined her reputation, that night over Afghanistan when she had saved Team 7, felt simultaneously distant and immediate. The tactical details remained vivid in her memory, but the emotional weight had evolved from personal achievement to professional responsibility. She had become the pilot that others aspired to be, carrying expectations that extended far beyond her individual capabilities. "Ghost, this is Tower. You're cleared for final approach. Welcome home." The landing was smooth and professional, the kind of routine arrival that concluded thousands of military flights every day. But for Ghost, it represented the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. She would continue serving, but in roles that emphasized different skills and different contributions to national security. As she shut down the A-10 systems and completed post-flight procedures for the final time as a regular pilot, Ghost felt the bittersweet satisfaction that came with closing one door while opening another. She had proven herself in ways that mattered, earned respect that couldn't be granted or taken away, and found her calling in the intersection between courage and competence. Her legacy would live on in the pilots she had trained, the standards she had established, and the example she had set for officers who would follow in her footsteps. The call sign Ghost would be remembered long after her active flying career ended, a reminder that excellence was possible when training, determination, and character converged at the critical moment. Ghost climbed out of the cockpit for the final time, looking back at the aircraft that had carried her through some of the most challenging moments of her career. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities and different challenges, but today had been perfect, a reminder of why she had chosen to serve, and a promise that service would continue in whatever form the future required. The sky would always be there, waiting for new pilots to discover what was possible when human ambition met mechanical precision in pursuit of missions that mattered. Ghost's time in the cockpit was ending, but her influence on military aviation was just beginning to be felt in ways she could never fully anticipate. 3 years into her Pentagon assignment, Ghost found herself in briefing rooms where decisions were made that would affect thousands of pilots she would never meet. Her role as Deputy Director of Air Operations had evolved beyond anything she had imagined during her flying career, requiring her to think in terms of global strategy rather than individual missions. The morning briefing focused on emerging threats in the South China Sea, where Chinese military expansion was creating tensions that could escalate into conflicts requiring American military intervention. Ghost studied intelligence reports that painted a picture of sophisticated adversaries with capabilities that far exceeded anything she had faced over Afghanistan. "Major Blackwood," said General Patterson, the operations director, "your experience with close air support in contested environments makes you uniquely qualified to assess these threat scenarios. What's your evaluation of our current capabilities?" Ghost had spent weeks analyzing the tactical implications of near-peer conflict, understanding that future wars would be fought against enemies with advanced air defense systems, electronic warfare capabilities, and the kind of professional military training that made insurgents look like amateurs by comparison. "Sir, our current close air support doctrine assumes air superiority that may not exist in future conflicts. We need to develop tactics that account for contested airspace and sophisticated threats that can engage our aircraft from extended ranges." The room fell silent as the implications of Ghost's assessment settled over the assembled officers. For 2 decades, American military aviation had operated in environments where the enemy's most dangerous weapons were small arms and shoulder-fired missiles. Future conflicts would require adaptation to threats that could challenge American technological advantages. General Patterson leaned forward with the intense focus that characterized senior officers grappling with strategic challenges. "Major, what specific recommendations would you make for preparing our pilots for these evolved threat environments?" Ghost had been preparing for this question since accepting her Pentagon assignment, understanding that her credibility depended on translating combat experience into strategic recommendations that could influence military doctrine for decades to come. "Sir, we need realistic training scenarios that replicate near-peer threats. Our pilots have become accustomed to operating with impunity, but future conflicts will require evasion, deception, and tactics that haven't been necessary since the Cold War." The briefing continued for another hour, touching on everything from aircraft modifications to pilot training programs. Ghost found herself advocating for changes that would prepare the Air Force for conflicts that might never materialize, but which could determine national security outcomes if they did occur. Her recommendations would eventually influence training programs at every level of military aviation, from basic pilot training to advanced tactical development. The lessons she had learned over Afghanistan, the importance of adaptability, precision, and calculated risk-taking, were being institutionalized into doctrine that would guide American pilots through whatever challenges the future might present. The call came at 2:30 hours on a Tuesday morning, rousing Ghost from the kind of deep sleep that came with Pentagon assignments where 18-hour days were routine rather than exceptional. The voice belonged to her former squadron commander, now a general responsible for special operations worldwide. Kieran, we have a situation developing in Eastern Europe that requires someone with your specific background. How quickly can you be ready for deployment? Ghost was instantly awake, her mind shifting from peaceful sleep to operational readiness, with the automatic response that characterized career military officers. Deployment meant returning to the world of tactical operations, trading strategic planning for immediate action. "Sir, I can be ready in 4 hours. What's the situation?" The briefing that followed painted a picture of international crisis that had escalated beyond diplomatic solutions. American personnel were at risk in a location where official military intervention wasn't politically viable, requiring the kind of unofficial operation that would never appear in public records. Ghost's role would be to provide command and control for air operations, supporting a joint special operations task force. Her experience with close air support and her understanding of special operations requirements made her uniquely qualified for coordinating complex missions in politically sensitive environments. "Major, this operation will require the kind of tactical innovation you demonstrated over Afghanistan. The rules of engagement are restrictive, the political implications are significant, and failure isn't an option." Ghost understood that she was being offered the opportunity to return to operational flying, but in a role that combined her pilot skills with the strategic understanding she had developed during her Pentagon assignment. It was the kind of mission that could define the next phase of her career. "Sir, I accept the assignment. When do I deploy?" The answer came with the precision that characterized special operations planning. "Your transport leaves Andrews Air Force Base in 6 hours. You'll receive detailed briefings en route to your operational area." As Ghost packed her deployment gear with the efficiency that came from years of military service, she reflected on how her career had come full circle. She was returning to the kind of tactical operations that had made her reputation, but with the perspective and authority that came from senior leadership positions. The mission would test everything she had learned about aviation, leadership, and the delicate balance between political objectives and military necessity. She was no longer the young pilot trying to prove herself. She was a senior officer whose decisions would influence outcomes that extended far beyond individual tactical engagements. Ghost's journey from underestimated pilot to strategic leader was entering yet another phase, one that would require her to synthesize everything she had learned into leadership that could navigate the complexities of modern warfare while maintaining the standards of excellence that had defined her entire career. The aircraft waiting at Andrews would carry her toward challenges that would test her in ways that pure flying never could, demanding skills that transcended technical expertise to encompass the kind of judgment that determined success or failure in operations where margin for error was measured in lives rather than mission objectives. The C-17 transport aircraft crossed the Atlantic through weather that would have grounded civilian flights, its military crew navigating conditions that tested both equipment and human endurance. Ghost spent the flight reviewing classified briefings that painted an increasingly complex picture of the situation she was flying into. The crisis had begun 3 weeks earlier when a joint intelligence gathering operation had been compromised, leaving American and Allied personnel trapped in territory controlled by forces that officially didn't exist. The political situation prevented conventional military intervention, requiring the kind of surgical operation that special forces were designed to conduct. Ghost's mission was to establish a forward air operations center that could coordinate close air support for the extraction operation. She would be working with pilots from multiple nations, aircraft with different capabilities, and rules of engagement that changed based on political developments that occurred in real time. "Ma'am," said the loadmaster, as the C-17 began its descent toward the forward operating base, "the situation on the ground is fluid. Intelligence reports suggest that opposition forces are larger and better organized than initial assessments indicated." Ghost nodded, recognizing the familiar pattern of intelligence updates that revealed missions to be more complex than originally briefed. Her experience had taught her to plan for worst-case scenarios while hoping for better outcomes, a philosophy that had kept her alive through numerous combat deployments. The forward operating base was a study in controlled chaos, with aircraft, vehicles, and personnel from multiple nations working together toward common objectives, while maintaining the operational security that such missions demanded. Ghost was briefed by officers who spoke in careful euphemisms that acknowledged political sensitivities while conveying tactical realities. "Major, the extraction window is limited to 4 hours due to diplomatic considerations," explained Colonel Morrison, the task force commander. "We need to get our people out before political pressure forces mission termination." Ghost studied the tactical displays that showed friendly positions, enemy locations, and neutral areas where engagement could create international incidents. The operation would require precision that exceeded anything she had previously encountered, with consequences that extended far beyond military success or failure. Her first priority was establishing communications with the trapped personnel, confirming their status and coordinating extraction procedures that would maximize their chances of survival. The radio call she had been dreading came through clearly despite atmospheric interference. "Overwatch, this is Broken Arrow. We are alive, but situation is deteriorating rapidly. Enemy forces are closing on our position, and we estimate less than 12 hours before we're overrun." Broken Arrow was the call sign for the joint team that had been conducting intelligence operations when their cover was compromised. Ghost had worked with similar teams during her special operations assignments, understanding the kind of training and dedication that kept professionals functional under impossible circumstances. "Broken Arrow, this is Overwatch. We have assets positioning for extraction. Maintain current position and prepare for close air support operations beginning at first light." The night ahead would be spent coordinating aircraft, weapons loads, and tactical approaches that could thread the needle between mission success and international incident. Dawn brought weather that complicated an already dangerous mission. Low clouds and intermittent rain created visibility conditions that challenged even experienced pilots, while winds gusting to 30 knots made precision flying exponentially more difficult. Ghost's Forward Air Operations Center had become the nerve center for an operation involving aircraft from 4 different nations, each with unique capabilities and operating procedures. Her role was to coordinate these diverse assets into a coherent plan that could extract Broken Arrow team while avoiding the kind of collateral damage that would create diplomatic crises. "Overwatch, this is Falcon Flight. We're showing multiple radar contacts approaching the extraction area. Estimate 12 to 15 aircraft, probably hostile." The intelligence that enemy forces had air support transformed the mission from difficult to nearly impossible. Ghost's extraction aircraft would be operating in contested airspace against adversaries who had been planning their response to exactly this type of operation. "All stations, this is Overwatch. Mission parameters are changing. We now have confirmed hostile air activity in the extraction area. All aircraft maintain defensive postures until further notice." Ghost's tactical display painted a picture of approaching disaster. Broken Arrow Team was pinned down by ground forces, while enemy aircraft moved to establish air superiority over the extraction zone. The window for successful extraction was closing with each passing minute. "Ma'am," said her operations sergeant, "we're receiving diplomatic traffic that suggests political authorization for this mission may be withdrawn if casualties occur." Ghost faced the kind of decision that defined careers and lives. She could abort the mission and comply with political restrictions, condemning Broken Arrow Team to capture or death. Or she could authorize operations that might succeed militarily while creating diplomatic consequences that extended far beyond her authority. "Sergeant, our people are on the ground and depending on us. We proceed with extraction as planned." The radio crackled with Broken Arrow Team's situation report. "Overwatch, we're under heavy assault, multiple casualties. We can hold current position for maybe 30 minutes before we're overrun." 30 minutes to coordinate an extraction through contested airspace with limited political authorization and international consequences hanging in the balance. Ghost had faced impossible situations before, but never with stakes that extended beyond purely military considerations. Her decision would influence not just the lives of Broken Arrow Team, but relationships between allied nations and political calculations that affected global security. She was operating at the intersection between tactical expertise and strategic consequence, where individual decisions could reshape international relationships. "All stations, this is Overwatch. We're proceeding with extraction operations. Execute Phase 1 immediately." The mission she was authorizing would test every skill she had developed during her career, demanding leadership that could balance competing priorities while maintaining focus on the fundamental objective of bringing American personnel home alive. The next hour would determine whether her evolution from tactical pilot to strategic leader had prepared her for the kind of decisions that senior officers faced when politics and military necessity collided in real-world operations where perfect solutions didn't exist. The air battle that developed over the extraction zone was unlike anything Ghost had coordinated during her career. Enemy aircraft demonstrated capabilities and tactics that suggested professional training and modern equipment, forcing Allied pilots to adapt their procedures in real time while maintaining mission focus. Overwatch, Falcon Flight is engaged with hostile aircraft. We're outnumbered but holding position over the extraction zone. Ghost monitored multiple radio frequencies simultaneously, tracking friendly aircraft positions, enemy movements, and Broken Arrow Team's deteriorating situation on the ground. Her role had evolved from coordinator to battlefield commander, making tactical decisions that influenced the entire operation's success. Falcon Flight maintained defensive screen while extraction aircraft approach. Do not pursue hostiles beyond the immediate area. The extraction helicopters approached through weather that made formation flying treacherous, their crews demonstrating the kind of skill that made special operations possible. Ghost watched their progress on radar while calculating timing that would minimize their exposure to hostile fire. "Overwatch, this is Rescue 1. We're 2 minutes from the landing zone. Request immediate suppression of hostile positions." Ghost coordinated close air support that walked the fine line between effective fire support and excessive force that could create international incidents. Each weapons engagement was calculated to achieve tactical objectives while minimizing political complications. "Rescue 1, you're cleared for landing. Falcon Flight will provide cover during pickup operations." The helicopter extraction took place under fire that tested both aircrew skill and aircraft durability. Ghost monitored the operation through multiple sensor systems, watching as Broken Arrow Team fought their way to the landing zone, while extraction crews prepared to retrieve personnel under combat conditions. "Overwatch, Rescue 1 has all personnel aboard. We're departing the area now. The relief in the pilot's voice was audible despite professional communications discipline. Broken Arrow team was alive and heading toward safety, their intelligence materials preserved, and their operational security maintained despite the mission's compromise. But the political consequences were just beginning. Ghost's decision to proceed with extraction, despite diplomatic restrictions, would generate investigations, hearings, and career implications that extended far beyond the tactical success she had achieved. "Ma'am," reported her intelligence officer, "we're receiving queries from Washington about the operation's authorization and rules of engagement compliance." Ghost understood that her career was about to be scrutinized by officials who hadn't faced the impossible choice between abandoning American personnel and exceeding political authority. Her decision had been tactically correct and morally necessary, but politically complicated in ways that could end her military service. As Broken Arrow team flew towards safety and Allied aircraft returned to their bases, Ghost prepared for the kind of accountability that came with command decisions made under pressure. She had brought American warriors home, but at personal cost that wouldn't be calculated for months to come. Her evolution from pilot to leader had prepared her for this moment. The reality that senior officers sometimes had to risk everything to do what was right, accepting consequences that extended far beyond individual careers. The congressional hearing took place 6 months later in a committee room where Ghost faced questions from legislators who had never worn military uniforms, but held ultimate authority over defense policy and military careers. Her testimony would be recorded in official transcripts that would influence how future operations were authorized and conducted. "Major Blackwood," began the committee chairman, "your decision to proceed with extraction operations despite diplomatic restrictions has raised serious questions about military authority and political oversight. Can you explain your reasoning?" Ghost had prepared for this moment since returning from the deployment, understanding that her career depended on explaining complex tactical decisions to officials whose expertise lay in politics rather than military operations. "Sir, American personnel were in immediate danger of capture or death. The diplomatic restrictions were based on political considerations that didn't account for the tactical reality that our people faced. I made the decision that would bring them home alive." The questioning continued for 3 hours, covering everything from rules of engagement to international law to the chain of command authority that governed military operations. Ghost answered each question with professional precision, neither apologizing for her decisions nor criticizing the political process that had created the impossible situation. "Major, some have suggested that your actions exceeded your authority and created diplomatic complications that damaged American interests. How do you respond to these criticisms?" Ghost had anticipated this question, understanding that her response would influence not just her career, but the precedent for future operations where military and political objectives conflicted. "Sir, my oath as a military officer requires me to protect American personnel and complete assigned missions. When those obligations conflict with political considerations, I believe military officers must prioritize the lives of the people under their command." The hearing concluded without resolution, leaving Ghost's career in limbo while committees deliberated and political considerations influenced decisions that should have been based purely on military performance. She had saved lives and completed her mission, but in an environment where political calculations often outweighed tactical success. The letter arrived 2 weeks later, bearing the Pentagon seal and the kind of official language that characterized career-defining communications. Ghost opened it with the resignation that came from understanding that doing the right thing often carried professional consequences that extended far beyond individual choices. "Major Blackwood, Following extensive review of your conduct during classified operations in Eastern Europe, it has been determined that your actions, while tactically successful, exceeded authorized parameters in ways that created diplomatic complications. Ghost read the letter with professional detachment, understanding that her military career was entering a new phase that would test her commitment to service in ways that combat had never demanded. She had proven herself as a pilot, leader, and tactical commander, but the political realities of modern warfare required different skills and different sacrifices. The choice before her was clear: accept reassignment to positions where her experience would be valued but her independent judgment constrained, or retire from military service to pursue opportunities where her skills could be applied without political limitations. Either path would represent another evolution in a career that had consistently demanded adaptation to challenges that couldn't be anticipated or prepared for through conventional training. Ghost's retirement ceremony took place on a crisp autumn morning at the Air Force Memorial, where three soaring spires reached toward the sky like silver arrows, commemorating the service of airmen who had dedicated their lives to defending American freedom. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. Ghost was joining the ranks of veterans whose service had shaped military aviation in ways that would influence generations of pilots. The assembled crowd included officers from multiple services, foreign military representatives, and civilians whose lives had been affected by Ghost's career in ways they might never fully understand. General Patterson, now wearing 4 stars and serving as Air Staff Director, delivered remarks that captured Ghost's unique contribution to military aviation. "Kieran Blackwood represents the kind of officer that makes our military exceptional," Patterson said, his voice carrying across the memorial grounds. "She demonstrated courage under fire, innovation under pressure, and leadership under circumstances that would have defeated lesser individuals. Her legacy will live on in the pilots she trained, the standards she established, and the example she set for what it means to serve with honor." The ceremony included the presentation of the Legion of Merit, recognition for Ghost's Pentagon service that had influenced Air Force doctrine in ways that extended far beyond individual operations. The medal was accompanied by citations that used careful language to acknowledge classified accomplishments that would never be fully described in public records. Ghost's response was characteristically brief and focused on the people who had made her success possible. "Military service is fundamentally about the people who serve alongside you and the people you serve to protect. I've been privileged to work with extraordinary professionals whose competence and dedication made whatever success I achieved possible." After the ceremony, Ghost was approached by dozens of officers whose careers had intersected with hers at various points, each offering perspectives on how her service had influenced their own professional development. The conversations revealed the ripple effects of leadership that extended far beyond immediate command relationships. "Ma'am," said a young captain wearing A-10 pilot wings, "I read your tactical reports from Afghanistan during pilot training. Your night mission with Team 7 is taught as a case study in close air support innovation." Ghost smiled at the realization that her combat missions had become training materials for pilots she would never meet, ensuring that lessons learned through experience would inform tactical decisions for years to come. Her individual achievements had been institutionalized into doctrine that would guide American pilots through whatever challenges the future might present. The memorial service for Senior Chief Reaper had planted seeds that were now bearing fruit in ways Ghost was only beginning to understand. Her career had evolved from personal achievement to organizational influence, from individual excellence to institutional legacy. As the ceremony concluded and attendees began to disperse, Ghost reflected on the journey that had brought her from basic flight training to this moment. Each phase had built on the previous one while preparing her for challenges that couldn't be anticipated, creating a career that had consistently exceeded her original ambitions, while demanding sacrifices that had shaped her in fundamental ways. Military service had given her purpose, identity, and the satisfaction that came from contributing to something larger than individual success. Now it was time for the next chapter. Ghost's transition to civilian employment brought opportunities that leveraged her unique combination of tactical expertise, strategic understanding, and leadership experience. The defense contracting company that recruited her specialized in developing technologies and training programs that prepared military personnel for emerging threats. Her role as Director of Advanced Tactical Development required her to analyze evolving battlefield conditions and translate operational requirements into technical specifications that could guide equipment development and procurement decisions. She was essentially serving as a bridge between operational reality and industrial capability. The work was intellectually challenging in ways that military service had never been, requiring her to think systematically about problems that affected entire military branches rather than individual units or operations. Her recommendations would influence billions of dollars in defense spending and the equipment that would protect American service members for decades to come. "Kieran," said Dr. Sarah Chen, the company's technical director, "your operational background gives us credibility with military customers that purely academic expertise couldn't provide. You understand what works and what doesn't because you've actually done it." Ghost's first project involved developing training scenarios that would prepare pilots for the kind of near-peer conflicts that her Pentagon assignment had identified as increasingly probable. The work required her to synthesize intelligence reports, tactical analyses, and technological assessments into realistic training programs. The challenge was creating scenarios that were challenging enough to prepare pilots for sophisticated threats while remaining achievable enough to build confidence rather than undermine it. Ghost drew on her combat experience to design training that captured the uncertainty, time pressure, and consequences that characterized real-world operations. "The key is making training realistic without making it overwhelming," Ghost explained to a team of simulation designers. "Pilots need to experience the stress and complexity of combat without becoming paralyzed by it." Her work attracted attention from military leaders, who recognized the value of training programs designed by officers who had actually faced the situations being simulated. Ghost found herself consulting for military organizations worldwide, sharing expertise that had been developed through years of operational experience. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was now influencing military aviation from outside the service, using civilian resources to support military objectives in ways that her uniformed service had never allowed. Her retirement had actually expanded her ability to contribute to national defense rather than limiting it. 6 months into her civilian career, Ghost received a call from the Air Force Academy, where officials were developing leadership programs that would prepare cadets for the kind of challenges she had faced throughout her career. They wanted her to help design curricula that would develop officers capable of thinking independently while maintaining the discipline that military service required. "Ma'am," said Colonel Rodriguez, the Academy's commandant, "we need programs that prepare officers for situations where standard procedures don't apply. Your experience suggests you understand how to balance individual initiative with organizational requirements." Ghost accepted the consulting contract, understanding that she could influence officer development in ways that would shape military leadership for generations. Her journey from tactical pilot to strategic advisor was entering yet another phase, one that emphasized education and preparation rather than immediate operational requirements. The leadership seminar that Ghost developed for the Air Force Academy became a cornerstone of cadet education, preparing future officers for the kind of complex decision-making that modern warfare demanded. Her curriculum emphasized case studies drawn from real operations, requiring cadets to grapple with scenarios where perfect solutions didn't exist. "The most important lesson I can teach you," Ghost told her first class of cadets, "is that military leadership often requires making decisions with incomplete information under time pressure, while accepting full responsibility for outcomes you can't completely control." The cadets, representing the next generation of Air Force officers, responded to Ghost's teaching with enthusiasm that reminded her why she had chosen military service in the first place. Their questions were intelligent, their dedication was obvious, and their potential was unlimited given proper development and guidance. Ghost's seminars covered everything from tactical decision-making to strategic planning to the ethical considerations that governed military operations in democratic societies. She used her own experiences as teaching materials, showing how individual decisions could influence outcomes that extended far beyond immediate tactical situations. "Ma'am," asked one cadet, "how do you balance political restrictions with military necessity when they conflict?" Ghost smiled at the question, recognizing her own younger self in the cadet's earnest concern for doing the right thing under impossible circumstances. Her answer drew on years of experience that had taught her the complexity of serving in a military that answered to civilian authority. "You have to understand that political and military considerations are both legitimate within their proper spheres. Your job as an officer is to provide military expertise to decision-makers who must balance multiple factors that extend beyond purely tactical concerns." The discussion that followed revealed the sophistication of cadets who had grown up in an era of continuous military operations, giving them perspectives on warfare that previous generations had developed only through direct experience. They understood complexity in ways that made Ghost optimistic about the future of military leadership. Her teaching assignment evolved into a permanent position as the Academy's first professor of applied military leadership, a role that allowed her to influence officer development on a scale that tactical commands had never permitted. She was literally shaping the minds that would lead American military forces through whatever challenges the future might present. The academic environment provided intellectual satisfaction that operational assignments had never offered, while maintaining connection to military service that kept her contributions relevant and immediate. Ghost had found the perfect synthesis of her desire to serve and her need for challenges that fully utilized her accumulated experience. Years of flying combat missions, leading operational units, and making strategic decisions had prepared her for a role that demanded all those skills while adding the dimension of education that would multiply her influence through every officer she taught. The young cadets who sat in her classrooms would carry her lessons into whatever conflicts and crises awaited them, ensuring that her operational expertise would continue influencing military operations long after her direct involvement had ended. Her evolution from underestimated pilot to respected educator represented the culmination of a career that had consistently demanded adaptation to new challenges, while building on the foundation of competence and character that had defined her service from the beginning. 20 years after the mission over Afghanistan that had made her reputation, Ghost received an invitation that brought her career full circle. The Special Operations Museum was dedicating a new exhibit on close air support, featuring the mission that had saved Team 7 as a case study in tactical innovation under impossible circumstances. The museum director, a retired Navy admiral who had commanded Special Operations Forces during the height of combat operations, explained the exhibit's significance during their initial planning meeting. "Your mission represents exactly the kind of thinking that makes special operations successful. When standard procedures don't work, professionals have to create new solutions in real time." Ghost agreed to participate in the exhibit development, understanding that her experience could provide educational value for visitors who might never fully appreciate what military service demanded, but who needed to understand the dedication and competence of the people who served to protect them. The exhibit included detailed recreations of the tactical situation, audio recordings of actual radio communications, and interactive displays that allowed visitors to understand the complexity of coordinating air support with ground operations under combat conditions. Ghost provided historical context that brought the technical details to life. The key lesson, Ghost explained to the museum's education director, is that military success often depends on individual professionals who are willing to take calculated risks to accomplish missions that matter. The people who serve in special operations understand that some objectives are worth risking everything to achieve. The exhibit opening drew hundreds of visitors, including active duty personnel, veterans, and civilians who wanted to understand military operations that were usually classified or simplified in popular media. Ghost found herself answering questions that revealed genuine curiosity about military service and its demands. "Ma'am," asked a high school student, "what made you decide to risk so much for people you'd never met?" Ghost considered the question carefully, understanding that her answer would influence how young people viewed military service and the obligations that came with wearing the uniform. Military service is fundamentally about accepting responsibility for other people's safety and freedom. When American service members are in danger, everyone else in the military has an obligation to help them, regardless of personal risk or cost. The conversation continued for over an hour, touching on topics that ranged from tactical procedures to military ethics to the personal qualities that made effective military service possible. Ghost realized that her teaching role had expanded beyond the Air Force Academy to include public education about military service and its meaning. The museum exhibit would reach thousands of visitors annually, ensuring that the lessons learned from Team 7's rescue would continue influencing public understanding of military operations and the people who conducted them. Ghost's individual experience had been transformed into educational material that would serve the public interest for decades to come. As the exhibit opening concluded and visitors began to leave, Ghost reflected on how her career had evolved from individual achievement to institutional influence to public education. Each phase had built on the previous one while expanding her ability to contribute to national security and public understanding. Her journey from underestimated pilot to respected educator and public advocate represented the kind of service that extended far beyond individual careers to encompass lasting contributions to the military profession and the society it served. Standing in the museum surrounded by displays that captured a single night's work over Afghanistan, Ghost understood that her true legacy lay not in individual accomplishments, but in the influence she had exercised through teaching, mentoring, and demonstrating what was possible when training, courage, and determination converged at the critical moment. The exhibit would ensure that her story continued inspiring future generations of military personnel and the civilians who depended on their service, creating a legacy that would outlast any individual career or personal achievement. Her evolution was complete, but her influence would continue growing through every person who learned from her example and carried forward the standards she had established through decades of exceptional service to the nation she had sworn to defend.